What's a wall of recusals and withdrawals? And who do I want to put on it next? Well, I've got some ideas. And that judge in the What the Hales case, I think he belongs on this wall. Let's talk about my wall of recusals and who's on it and why. I was also on a live stream with DUI Guy, with Larry Foreman, on Sunday night, and it was a 5-hour live stream. I was on for 3 hours where we read through the motion to recuse Judge DeThomasis. During that conversation, my wall of recusals came up, and a bunch of people wanted to know, what is my wall of recusals? So I thought that would be an interesting thing to talk about. The wall of recusals is something that I've been keeping for years through my investigations into different court scandals. Every time someone recuses themselves off a case that I'm covering, I add them to my wall. So I thought I would go over a few of the people on the wall and why they're there and what landed them there. Let's start in St. Louis, Missouri. So several years ago, I think it was 2021, I began investigating a case. It was Evita Tolu came to my attention. She's an attorney. And she came to my attention because she had filed a lawsuit against guardians ad litem in the St. Louis court system, one in particular named Elaine Pudlowski. And she had made a lot of accusations against the guardian that the guardian had acted outside of her ethical guidelines in a custody dispute and had basically fixed a case for Evita Tolu's ex-husband, who was an abuser, according to Evita and police reports that I saw. But because he had more money, Elaine Pudlowski was accused of, telling the judge to rule in his favor, and he got custody of both kids. She was also involved in sending many mothers, I think we counted up to 16 mothers, to the same court-appointed psychologist who diagnosed every single one of them with the same personality disorder, borderline personality disorder. And that would be a really strange thing because borderline personality disorder is one of the rarer personality disorders. And statistically speaking, St. Louis County would have had, way more than its fair share of borderline personality disorders. The local news looked into it. They did an 8-minute segment on it. And it was true that this man the court psychologist had made just hundreds of thousands of dollars on these cases, taking kids away from mothers who he claimed had borderline personality disorder. Now, when these mothers went to other physicians, other psychologists, they were all given a clean bill of health. They were given diagnoses that conflicted with borderline personality disorder. Most of them had PTSD. And not borderline personality disorder. And of course, PTSD is something that a lot of people dealing with family court end up getting because the process is so traumatic. Let's talk about the therapist in the case, specifically Dr. James Reed. Can I see a show of hands of people who've had Dr. James Reed in their cases? Okay.
His evaluations, of which I have both mine and my ex-husband's, was incredibly slanted towards my ex. The verbiage in his evaluations, essentially he took a very limited amount of data and he did a lot of subjective reasoning. And anything that he subjectively reasoned about me was terribly negative. Brought up everything within my life that I had shared honestly with him and exploded it to where it presented me as a very unfavorable person / parent. He is the reason why, one of the reasons why it went down the way it did with Hemphill and why I lost full legal of my children and went to 50-50.
But he provided, both for my mom and my father, that a subjective and objective opinion of their psychological state. And his objective opinion was that because my mother, quote unquote, showed herself in a more favorable light, that she should be diagnosed with an unspecified personality disorder. That's not, no, it is not objective. It is a subjective opinion based on stupid grounds. First of all, an unspecified personality disorder does not exist. There are only 3, at least 3 clumps. And unspecified is not one of those. You have to specify it, otherwise it is not a personality disorder.
diagnosed me with borderline personality disorder. He listed all the traits of borderline personality disorder, but never once said which of those traits that I had.
Rita, you had Rita as well?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
And he diagnosed you with?
Oh, it's a bouquet.
Go
So
ahead.
I had a borderline personality disorder. I had antisocial personality disorder, which you can only have if you have a criminal conviction, which I do not. So the report said that I had all these disorders. And when I paid $3,000 to get the Reed's file, I took the result, I took my answers and my ex's answers to another professional, and he ran the reports. And they came that I am absolutely healthy, and my ex was
Is that-
hostile, violent, and had all these personality disorders.
Evita Tolu files this lawsuit in the 21st Circuit Court of St. Louis, and the chief judge at the time was Chief Judge Michael Burton. There was a leaked Zoom call of 40 guardians ad litem, including Elaine Pudlowski and a bunch of other guardians ad litem that were getting together on a Zoom call to coordinate this lawsuit and help Elaine. And they admitted in the recording that they had had communications with Chief Justice Judge Michael Burton about this case.
I actually called, I knew Judge, because I've been involved with this, and Judge Burton, with the email that you sent, I put a call into Judge Burton so he could look into that. And I haven't heard back from him yet, but when I talked to his clerk, she's like, he is so overwhelmed with everything that, so I have information about that. I can get that to you after the call, but
now that's called ex parte communication. I wrote an article exposing his email. We got our hands on his email and that video, and he had to resign in disgrace. And the entire 21st Circuit Court of St. Louis had to recuse itself from Evita Tolu's lawsuit. That suit made its way through several appeals and was eventually dismissed because all the actors who worked for the court were given immunity. It was a really terrible case. 31 judges had to recuse themselves because of the reporting that I did on that case. So they went up on my Wall of Recusals. Who's next? In St. Louis, Haynes v. Haynes. The tragic story of Mikaela Haynes, a 14-year-old little girl who ended up committing suicide because her guardian ad litem, whose name was Jennifer Williams, continued to try to reunite her with her abuser father. Now, Mikaela Haynes' father is Charles Haynes, who was sent to prison for. Mikaela found out that her guardian ad litem was going to testify on her father's behalf in court, and the very next day, she killed herself. It is a horrific story. And when I wrote this story on pjmedia.com, the very next day, Jennifer Williams stepped off the case, and I put her on my Wall of Recusals. And by the way, she had been asked to step off the case multiple times before my reporting on it. Who else is on this board of recusals that we should talk about? Oh, Cynthia Buckley and Shannon Moreau, Burkhart v. Adkins. What a case. This case, summed up, is a court psychologist and a guardian ad litem in cahoots together to remove children from their father who had been caring for them since they had been abandoned when they were very little by their mother who had a drug problem. She tried to come back into their lives when they were teenagers, and she wanted shared custody. She wanted them to just come back to her with open arms after being gone for 10 years. And the guardian ad litem colluded with Cynthia Buckley. The guardian ad litem's name was Shannon Moreau. She colluded with Cynthia Buckley to do this reunification thing with mom, and neither one of the kids wanted really anything to do with her because she had not been in their lives for a very long time. They were making up things about Jacob Burkhart, about his fathering. They were doing all sorts of terrible things. I wrote about them. And very shortly afterwards, and I also wrote about the commissioner in that case, Di Tommaso. His name was Commissioner Di Tommaso. And he was being very biased against the father in the case and continuing to force the children to spend time with this woman they didn't even know. I wrote about this on pgmedia.com. I will link it below. And after I did, Commissioner DiTomaso was taken off the case, and it went to a real judge, and the real judge removed Shannon Moreau as the guardian ad litem immediately from the case. And she removed Cynthia Buckley too, and the children were allowed to go to their own therapist who they already liked and had a good relationship with, and dad retained his full custody. And they were allowed to, the kids were allowed to make their own decisions as far as visiting their mom. There's more people on that wall who have resigned or recused themselves after I start reporting on a case, which just goes to show that sometimes media sunlight can really help in a case like this. And I'm hoping that we'll have the same result in the Hales case in Florida with Judge DeThomasis, because he seems to have a real disdain for the First Amendment, and judges like that should not be given any power in this judicial system.